to ask the questions, or I could stand in there. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to put about anything they like? You don't have to talk about Iran, we've probably done enough of that. Hello.
Hi. I wanted to ask you a question about journalism and about embedded journalism, which became sort of a big issue during and post Iraq. And obviously some of the sort of most extreme examples of that's like Fox News in the States. But you were talking about the Ofcom regulations, and I wonder if you could just expand a bit on how that process works. I mean, do they measure up how many people you've interviewed, and how does it?
Well, it's very interesting because when I started in television, which was in '76, if you saw a lawyer in the office more than once a week, you've seen a lawyer a lot. We now have 3 lawyers who work on rotation and are in the office all the time. And they're in the office all the time, not for what I've always thought would be the obvious reason, committing libel, but to check compliance. Compliance is the order of the day. Now, actually, Ofcom is an extremely good regulator. They're very rational and elastic, and basically the deal is that in 24 hours, if you represent one side very, very specifically, and perhaps from one side of the issue, then within the 24-hour period you should balance it with some complementary comparative piece. But I mean, touch wood, I've never been found in violation. We have occasionally, but very rare, very rare. They're pretty good. I mean, it's in many ways, it's I think a much better regulator than the BBC's Trust, which has made a bit of a mess of life. And they will definitely, I'm sure, rejig it into some. Or they may even have the BBC regulated by our regulator as well. Compliance is a big thing, and every single story we do is checked for compliance. I confess I don't really even know the detail of compliance. I just know when the lawyer comes and looks at my headlines and says, "You can't say that." What do you mean I can't say it? Well, justify it. Well, maybe I can't actually justify. Well, would you write something you can justify, please? Whatever. So you're 12 years old again. It's okay. It's good for you. It reduces your sense of importance, which is vast. As for embedded, I mean, it's a big problem. Let's say you've got no access to the battlefield. As long as the viewer is absolutely aware of what you're doing, I am with the US 25th Brigade, or whatever it is, and I've been with them for 10 days, and I eat and wash and sleep and do my day with them, then at least they know where you're coming from. But it is very controlled, and again, you have to say that. So I think you've just laid off, but I don't think I would ever advocate refusing embedded. I've been embedded myself. It's a strange old business. You're suddenly under arms, as it were. You're not with a weapon, but you're in fatigue and stuff, and you worry about being identified with a force that you don't necessarily want to be identified with, because you may be embedded on either side. But it's all become much more formal than when I started. When I first went, when I was in the Iran-Iraq War in 1980, I mean, we had no flak jackets, there was no embedding, it was chance. You had to find a decent guy who would take you into his little group and agree to look after you. A man who owned a ship, 44,000-ton bulk ore carrier, saw it over my shoulder in a piece to camera during an artillery fight across the Shat al-Arab between Iran and Iraq. And he sent my editor a telex saying, "I've just seen my ship, and neither Iran nor Iraq admits it exists, and I've got 57 people on board. Could I appoint your correspondent, ship's agent, get him to go and negotiate?" And I got this telex from my editor saying, "You really don't have to do this, John, but..." Well, I knew that the moment I became a ship's agent, I could get into the Basra dockyard. But I had to declare to the viewer that I had done this, but not because I was a reporter, because we were banned, but because I was now a completely different sort of human being. I was now the ship's agent. And we were able to get into the dockyard, find a ship that was in radio contact with the Al Tanin, which is the boat in question. Beautiful, beautiful, big, brand new boat, still at sea now, amazingly, but it was stuck in this waterway because of so much shipping having been sunk further down. And our commando fellow, when we told him that there were 57 people on board, said, there's nobody on board. Hasn't been any movement there for at least 6 weeks. You're lying. And I said, well, there are, and I've spoken, come with me to the dockyard. So he listened and he heard these voices, which he couldn't understand. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, you and I, we have to swim out there, and we will decide whether there is anybody there or not. And so the next day at midnight, he and I, with the reporter Robert Fisk sitting on the bankside watching our insanity, and my own crew filming with very crude video, he and I, this bloke, swam out. It's a disgusting waterway. I don't know what it carries beyond shipping, but it's not nice. And we got to the ship. They'd left a rope ladder over the side. I had no idea even how to climb up a 44,000-ton alcohol carrier. It's very big. And I didn't realise that what you had to do was to turn the rope sideways, and you could go up that way, and I was trying to go up that way. And of course you bang your knees, you cut me on the wetsuit that we were in, you're covered in mud and the rest of it. We got onto the ship, went down into the stack at the back, found about 30 Filipinos cowering in a sort of black hole in Calcutta. They screamed at us, they thought we were an apparition. Went down to the very bottom, and there were the officers drinking beer. They had 3 wives down there, so there were women on board. And of course the commander couldn't believe his luck. He said, this is fantastic. I'm going to take these people off personally. This is going to be my great rescue effort. The captain said, not so fast, mate. We will use our own boats and the rest of it. And to cut a long story short, we got them off. And he set up a firefight to try and draw the Iranians so that we were covered, etc. But this is the way things evolve, you know. And then I wasn't embedded, I was just a ship's agent. But it's a complicated situation. Now it's very tight, very tight. We have to be well behaved. Another question. Sorry, I'll be shorter next time. Yes.
Thank you.
Come on.
Can I take you back to Liverpool?
Yes.
And,
it's a great city. Yeah.
Very good. You talked about regulation. When you think about South Africa and you having to cover it under apartheid. And I wanted to ask you what happened at Liverpool and how did you manage to get rusticated?
Well, very simple. I mean, in the late 60s, everyone was revolted, and I was revolted. I mean, we were all rebels in search of a cause. It was a fantastically kind of alive, mad period. The Sorbonne was occupied in 1968. We felt very envious of them. The LSE was occupied. Cambridge University had a bust up. I mean, Essex University, there's 1 or 2 people in the audience just old enough to possibly to have been there. They look like kind of people who might have been there. But you know, it was an intoxicating and absurd time when you know, it was post-contraceptive pill, pre-AIDS, it was free love, the whole thing was mad, and everybody was sort of driven and alive. And we were all looking for a cause. And of course, I had come back from between school and university, I'd done voluntary service overseas in Uganda. So I was fired with Africa and inequality and opportunity and hope and despair about South Africa. And Peter Hain was going around leading this campaign to stop the rugby tour, the Springbok rugby tour. Anyway, we were delirious when we discovered that the main investment that the university had was in Tate and Lyle. And Tate and Lyle had about the worst plantation record of any multinational national at the time. They had sugar plantations and other things down there which were mercilessly exploitative, etc. And so we said, yes, that's our cause. We were so excited. That's our cause. And we told the university they had to disinvest. And they said, well, you're here for 5 minutes, we're here for the rest of time, and I'm afraid you're going to leave it to us. And we said, that's not good enough, you've got to disinvest. They refused. We occupied their administrative block for 6 weeks, ran an alternative university in there, had all sorts of mad revolutions. I wasn't a member of anything, I was just sort of bleeding heart liberal. And anyway, to cut a long story short, the long vac came along and everybody left. So we were left rather exposed, and they grabbed 10 of us and sent us down. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Fortunately, I mean, I was broken at the time, but it was subsequently the best thing. So that, what else do you ask me? What happened?
That was pretty much it.
No, pretty much. It's a good way to start. And then I had to work 3 years of redemption in the drug centre.
How do you think your life would have gone if that hadn't happened? Like, would you have pursued the same road, or would you have maybe stayed more, I don't know, gone for Prime Minister or whatever your dream was before that?
I think, to be honest, I had no idea what road I was really going to pursue. You know, I'd probably just been a very bad lawyer because I was reading law. I really didn't know. I mean, I know then nobody knew what they were going to do because there was full employment and you knew you'd do whatever you wanted to do in a way. I mean, it was amazing. You could do what you wanted to do, which is not true now. How many people know what they're going to do now? How many people in this room know what they're going to do? How many people know what they're going to do? 1? 4? 5? Not a lot. And that's a good thing, because you need to be infinitely flexible. That's what I would be, a bad lawyer, if that.
What's your general feeling about the current US-Iranian nuclear negotiations? Do you think they can be revolutionary in their relation?
I mean, obviously there's tremendous difficulties domestically in America with a whole slab of this insane sort of this sort of cabal of Tea Partyists and the rest of it who I think probably don't know very much about Iran and know enough to be terribly frightened. And they want to bring in still more sanctions and the rest of it and bust up the talks. But I think despite that, and anyway, Obama has simply vetoed anything they try to do. But I think I'm absolutely certain that Obama wants a deal. You know, he made a great speech in Cairo in his last term. I know lots of people are disappointed in him. I think he's been completely hamstrung by the political circumstances into which he's found himself, and they're not of his making. Fox News could maybe participate a little bit in all of that. But I think Obama, he went to Cairo and extended the open hand of friendship to Iran, which for an American president was a pretty rare moment. But then subsequently there was no wrist, there was no elbow, no evidence of shoulder either. And this, I think he has always thought that Iran was the thing he could do, and I think he will do it. And I think Rouhani is the man for him to play with. And the Iranians want it badly too, not necessarily because sanctions have been such a huge success. They've been the most draconian sanctions ever imposed on any country on earth. I mean, no right to do any international transaction of any sort. All banks, everything has to be done in a different way. And so Turkey, for example, handles billions of transactions which should be above board and all would have to be behind closed doors because they are sanctions. I filmed outside a pharmacy where there are high-end cancer drugs supplied, and they couldn't. It wasn't that there was any sanctions on medicines. Oh no, we have no sanctions on medicines. There was a sanction on transactions, so you couldn't buy the wretched things. There was no mechanism for buying extremely expensive drugs, which they could normally afford very easily. It's a rich country. No, I think both sides need it badly, and they'll do it. And actually, the magical figure in it all may well be this unassuming Baroness Ashton, who was joked about and teased and ribbed, but she's extraordinarily understated, and she's kept this track open. And they met, I think 5 times they had this P5+1 meeting, in which there was nothing to discuss at all except the date of the next meeting and the place of the next meeting. 5 times they came together in perhaps 6-monthly intervals to discuss where, when. So the track was open, and they used to spend days discussing the date and the place. Days, 3 days, sometimes 4 days, discussing the date and the place. And then, when they needed a track, they were there. It was open, it was ready. And so Kerry and the rest of them were able to steam in. And she had by then become the most trusted figure. And she's now right in the middle of it. And she might be the key. It's an amazing thing. Nobody knows much about her. She's married to the pollster, Peter Calder. Very nice people. You could meet them in the high street in St Albans. Straightforward, very straightforward people. They could, she could deliver one of the most important moments of peace in our lifetime. Yes.
What do you think might be the end game in Syria?
God knows. I mean, I have no idea. I guess a sort of cantonization in which the Alawites, Assad's people, control the bit they control now, which has Damascus and the rest of it. I mean, maybe the kind of Al-Qaeda types, or ISIS or somebody, will control Aleppo, which is such a gorgeous city. Anybody here ever been to Syria?
I've been to Aleppo.
What a country! What a country! What people! Multicultural. Talk about that. 13% were Christians, for heaven's sake. You know, I mean, and Aleppo. I mean, if you went to Aleppo at Easter, you know, the clattering of crosses, the spreading of palms, the hymns, the bells, and so exciting, amazing, and so undamaged, and now ribbons. The most untouched country in the Middle East, and it's been absolutely ravaged. And you can't identify the one specific moment that brought us about, but the cascade of difficulty in the region and breakup has, you know, you pull one brick out and the whole wretched thing comes tumbling down. And we've got the big brick of Iraq, we've got the static brick of Iran, we've got Saudi Arabia, we've got Qatar, I mean, the richest country on earth, you know, tiny population, massive influence, you know, paying money into people who are fighting in there, and who are they? You know, what an amazing thing that in the end, the Western leaders said, come on, we're going to have to invade, and in invading, if it had happened, would have had to side with Al-Qaeda. I mean, it beggars belief. So I don't know what the end game's going to be, and I mean, it's the humanitarian failure that is so grim, so grisly. We talk about taking 500 people, you know, and I'm not saying that taking people from as far afield as that is the answer, but that's our gesture. And although DFID is doing a very good job, insofar as it can, I mean, 8 million people displaced, 8 million people, the size of the population of London, displaced. We can't even comprehend it. Displaced means your house, home, love, life, family, everything smashed, gone. We're all inured to it. It's become like Northern Ireland. You know, Northern Ireland during the Troubles was something we almost ceased to report because it was always the same. And Syria is always the same. Except there was a nice piece on YouTube with this bloke playing the piano in Yahoo. Really beautiful. Call it up. Oh, sorry, there we go. Yes.
It's a question related to the Trial and Killing Fields documentary you presented. Do you think journalists should be able to use images with high violence in television, mass media, press, maybe front pages? Or do you think there's a limit, like there's a limit to the degree of violence you can expose and use in mass media?
I mean, we have a limit, and it's regulated by Ofcom, and there is a regulation you're not allowed to put. I mean, that had to go out at 11 o'clock at night. It wasn't allowed to go before the watershed. There's a 9 o'clock watershed before which you're not really supposed to show dead bodies, etc., and all sorts. Quite detailed. But I think, I mean, I feel very torn about this. I think it's very difficult in an age of video games and the rest of it. I had to play some video games the other day with Christopher Booker. This was an extraordinary experience, but I'd never played a video game. And my problem with video games is there's so much death. I mean, and kids are killing an enormous number of people, vast numbers of people. And we were playing a lot, and I said, look, we've now played 2 games, and we've killed, I've lost count of how many people we've killed, or have been killed in the course of what we've been doing here. I said, well, don't worry, I'll get you one which is okay. This one's Lego. and with a few frames, some guy had been blown to pieces. I said, he's dead. He said, John, it's Lego. I said, but in the eye of the child, it's a person, and he's just been killed. So we are protecting people from the real life of which they play a mock every day. And so how do kids delineate between what is real and what is fiction? And if you show them what is real, do they understand it to be real even? Or is it another video game? And I do feel very conflicted. And yet, if we don't show the consequences of war, we tolerate it. And we think it's a possible option. Let's invade. It's a big problem. Big problem. I do feel very conflicted about it. I hate the thought of my own children when they were young seeing this stuff. But at the same time, I long for them as young adults to see it and become activated by it. Ultimately, don't tell the Daily Mail this, all good journalists are politically motivated. Small p politically motivated. We want to change the world. We want to make things better. We want to tell people about what's wrong and what could be done about putting it right. Too often we talk about what's wrong and do nothing about what's right, which is but I think not telling the truth about war. I'm very proud of what we did in Sri Lanka because of all those pictures were, of course, it will not be possible for a tyrant to kill his own people. It's always invariably a man. He kill his own people without people finding out, because the mobile phone ensures that victims can film the atrocities that they do. And that's what happened in Sri Lanka. We were able to piece together hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of mobile phones from both sides. Some were trophy pictures of soldiers enjoying beheading, shooting, whatever, their victims, and some were the victims filming what was happening there. Sorry.
I myself, even though I've got a wheelchair, been to over 30 countries myself. Do you think, and I'm a bit of a news junkie, do you think that the news coverage is actually getting worse?
Do I think news coverage is getting worse? It's different, but I'm not sure whether, I don't know what the better and worse really are either way. Do people know more about what's going on? Do they have more of a chance to know what's going on? I mean, I watch the way people consume the programme I work on, and I suspect very few people actually watch the whole hour. In fact, very few people probably watch it at all as a programme. But, and then I'm very conscious that people extract bits of it on YouTube or on Channel 4 Catch Up or whatever it is. People are, the trouble is that perhaps we are beginning to retrieve the things that interest us and don't expose ourselves to things which might interest us. I take, for example, the New York Review of Books, the greatest publication in the English language on a regular basis available to mankind, humankind today. It's an amazing publication because if you open it, there are 2 things you knew you absolutely had to read, and there are 5 you never knew you needed to read. And you emerge from it sort of thinking, my God, is that incredible? So, I mean, you think you're going to pick the next thing, and you find yourself reading the whole thing. And actually, because that is the power of Twitter, that you can read something like that, and then you can extract it, bit-link the URL, and slam it up and say, read this. This is it. This is it. This will take you to the very heart of this particular problem. That's incredibly exciting. So far more people are exposed to the New York Review of Books, a once obscure literary publication, than ever in history. I don't know whether more people are exposed to what we're doing or fewer. I think what we do on my programme, which is unusual, because we have length, which is, time is the enemy when you're trying to deal with news events. It's very difficult to encapsulate things quickly enough. I see an awful lot of questions.
Moving on to what you said earlier about the rise, and one of the biggest problems we have is we just don't talk about it, or we talk about it in the wrong way. I mean, how do you think perceptions can be changed?
Well, by talking about it, I think, you see, I think too many of us, I mean, I love football, no problem. I support Brighton and Hove Albion, but I think, in fact, we possibly talk too much about football, particularly men. And I'm wondering what space talking about football takes up that might be spent with just a word or two about Syria. Now, I'm not saying people in that lovely, pub-strewn, quiet time, or even noisy time, should sort of immediately think, I'm sorry, I've got to think about world events. No, but it's as if there should be a slightly more eclectic discussion going on. I am worried about, our age in which we live enables us to get tighter and tighter and tighter into something, to the exclusion of everything else. I mean, what a dream. I mean, even when I was a kid, access to football, other than playing, was incredibly limited. And you might see Match of the Day, and that'd be about it. But now you can watch all 5 games that are on tonight in the European Championships. All 5 games. 7 hours of football. What did you do with those 7 hours before you started watching 7 hours of football? What did you do before you played 5 hours of video games? What time, what space, what conversation, what human contact is being taken up by these activities? I'm a digital creep, I love it. I've got no problem. And I mean, as I said, the social network is a fantastic boon, I think. I think everything we can do now is very exciting, but we need to think what we're losing too.
You mentioned the Christian community in Syria. I know that the Christian community in Syria is one of the oldest in the world. And the Christians in Syria and, for example, the Coptic Christians in Egypt, do you think that we're forgetting about these millenary Christian communities in the revolutionary countries in the Middle East? And what do you think the future holds?
I think the difficulty is we're forgetting about everybody. Because it's too painful to remember. I mean, hell, what do we do about the displaced Christians in Aleppo or in Alexandria? The appalling, action against them. The Muslim Brotherhood were particularly violent against the Coptics. I don't know. I mean, I think basically this region will be purged of people who are not of a majority faith, and that will deeply de-enrich the region. It's a complex lattice work of cultures, and when I said Aleppo was a multicultural city, it was, and I can't see it ever becoming so again. Sorry to be a bit negative there. I'm going to take 2 or 3 at once because we won't otherwise get very far.
I was wondering how you prioritize headlines. I know, on the day of the Boston bombing, there was a statement column within Iraq where hundreds of people died, or 3 people died in Boston. But obviously Boston got a lot more coverage. I was wondering how you prioritize headlines and what sort of criteria you use.
Well, I think all the same prejudices that exist for all of us kick in, and ultimately a bomb in Baghdad is unfortunately not an unusual event, and though the loss of life was huge, a bomb in Boston is unusual. A bomb in the middle of a marathon is very unusual. And of course, our recent history has been hugely dictated by violent offence, externally imposed violent events affecting America. I mean, 9/11, we never knew, I guess we guessed, but we never knew that that atrocity would change history. And it has. The historians will look back on 9/11 as an absolutely massive watershed moment. After all, we had a president of the United States who decided that Saddam Hussein was responsible for it, and never really left that conviction. And yet it was completely without foundation. I mean, Iraq had nothing whatever to do with, and of course, we couldn't face the reality that the country that had spawned at least 17 of the 18 hijackers was a country that we're deeply dependent on to sell our military hardware. That actually we would have hundreds of jobs in Hemel Hempstead, Stevenage, lost if we broke with Saudi Arabia, not to speak of the oil and the rest that we needed. So it was better not really think too heavily about who these 17 were, what relation money and the rest of it might have had with any formal Saudi identity. Yeah, I can't remember what you asked.
Criteria of choosing headlines.
Yeah, well, and the answer in the end is, I guess people like us will, I mean, everybody's like us, but people in the Northern Hemisphere in a highly developed, material environment, I suppose, will be identified more easily than the victims of a Baghdad bomb. But it's completely wrong. I mean, if a Martian came in and decided the headline, the first headline would be, "Amazingly developed planet cannot feed its own." That's a pretty serious situation. Amazingly developed planet is destroying itself with carbon emissions. Yeah, that's a pretty big story. But those are not our headlines, and won't be. And I don't suppose the Baghdad bomb, unless we're fortunate enough not to have had anybody killed anywhere else, in which case we'll do a bit. To be honest, Baghdad bombs, which are now, almost daily, I mean, 1,000 people are dying a month, are not being reported at all, hardly. We try to make sure that we do report each one, but it'll only be 5 lines. Yeah.
In your opinion, does Britain have a political influence in the world outside of its alliance with America?
Do you want to take a couple, just because we can get through them?
Yeah, well, it's trouble, each one is so interesting. I'll take yours as well, Doctor.
Elaborating on what you said about the prioritisation of certain headlines, and when you said we could choose what we were interested in, do you think that the danger of some stories being underrepresented in modern times leads to a control or influence over the government and what they take liberties in sort of intervening or addressing in foreign nations?
Well, I mean, I think there are, I don't know where it ends, but I think that is certainly one of the dangers. But it's very, and thanks for your contribution, by the way. Thank you. No, it's good. You never know why anybody's leaving in the end. Yeah, I mean, I think that is true. I mean, you mentioned government. What is government? That's an interesting thing, because in a way the government is something, an entity which seems not to have evolved as fast as the rest of us are evolving. I don't mean that in a political sense, just simply in a, what is it? What is Parliament? A sword and a half between you and the opposition, a joust about agricultural subsidies, which sounds like a farmyard in and of itself. It might be a good moment to start thinking about how could we use the digital age to democratize who we are and how we function. Obviously there are dangers in that, but there are also opportunities. When I wander around the Palace of Westminster, I feel perhaps the greatest advance we could make would be to think of another way of doing it, because it feels incredibly remote and not part of us. And that's a strange thing when it's making decisions about all our lives. I don't see any of you in there, and I'm not in there. I mean, none of us in there.
It's like Downton Abbey, I think.
Yes, it's got lots of Downton Abbey. The same period of architecture. Yes, and your British influence. I don't think, I don't mean much French influence either, or, I don't think we do have a huge amount of influence. We have a different kind of influence. I think, for example, London, like it or not, is a world city. And it's getting bigger and more prestigious and better all the time. But people don't say that's Britain, they say it's London. It's where I want to do my dodgy dealings. It's where I want to function. And people, it's amazing, amazing to be on the tube. You're an ethnic minority in your own country, which is brilliant. No problem. But it's interesting. And I don't go on the tube much because I ride a bicycle. But it's a very, very exciting city. And I speak as somebody who's lived there on and off basically the last 40 years. But is that influence? I just don't know. I mean, I think that we're evolving. That's what makes me a European. I'd really like a Europe of the regions. You know, I'd like Yorkshire to have as much say in Brussels as London has. I don't really want my nation to have a huge say in Brussels, because my nation's only a bit smaller than Europe in my head. What I'd really like to feel is that we're joined up. You know, people laugh at Italy, you know, because it's a country that doesn't really function as a country. There's only been a country for 120 years, but it's got the most brilliant local of any country on earth. You know, fabulous, powerful, strong, successful local communities, lashed to the clock tower, and competitive with each other and the rest of it. But of course it produces a sort of ludicrous figure like Berlusconi. Because actually nobody really cares about that bit, and it's rather funny. You know, it's sort of eternal maternity, and what's the latest implant he's had in his facial features, or yeah. What's he doing now? I see he's running for Europe now. He wants to be an MEP. God, so bizarre. Yeah.
What drew you? I thought it was, I mean, it's immensely interesting and in a funny way brave. What drew you to come out and say that you think of? I mean, I don't know if this is exactly what you said, but you think of sex when you see your female.
It was slightly misinterpreted, actually. In fact, the Daily Mail, I think, had a headline saying, "Every time I see a woman, I want to make love to her," or something like that. That wasn't what I said. What I said was that, and this was in the context of a festival, which was being staged on the South Bank in London, a very big festival, about being a man. It's not a popular subject. It's not a subject men particularly want to talk about. With lots of talk about women, and women's liberation, and feminism, and the rest of it. Manism, maleism, that's not talked about much, and who we are, what impact we have on other people's lives, and the rest of it. And I merely said, what I tried to put across was that that there was, in the evaluation of a person, one of the things within the mix was inevitably sex. And you'd be mad not to accept that. I mean, you are of different sexes, or you might be gay, and therefore the evaluation might be in a different direction. But it's somewhere there. But it's a subliminal thing, and it's over and removed as soon as any kind of proper engagement. But this is the first time you meet somebody that it has one of a whole this intelligence and appearance and everything. But the idea that you say, well, do you think I could? Or that's not really what I was saying at all. Maybe I expressed it badly. And I don't mind the fact that I've been bullied to hell for saying it, because actually, you know, we are descended from, you know, in the evolutionary sense, from animals, and if it weren't there, there would be no procreation, frankly. You know, it's ludicrous to say it doesn't happen. And lots of people have actually contacted me and said they agree. So, I mean, what it made me think was that the old media couldn't handle it. New media seemed to be extremely supportive. There were very interesting debates and things that went on. But of course, somebody like me, who the Daily Mail would see as a pinko, oh God knows what that is. Because what is left and right any longer? What is, you know, I don't know what politics is. Everything's in turmoil. Everything's changing. But anyway, that pinko, as Dennis Thatcher once called me, that pinko, you know, the moment he says something, let's give him a good kicking. Ah, bastard.
John, should we take one more?
Oh dear. Am I in trouble?
You're not in trouble. You can keep going, but you're going to miss your train.
25 minutes? I take two quick. Yes.
I was going to, I quite admire your ties. Where do you get them from?
Well, and I was even wearing a rainbow tie that way. But yes, wherever I can find them. But it is my fetish. Nobody else. Somebody asked me the other day whether I had a stylist. I don't think there's anybody who would describe themselves as my stylist. Yes, you two, and then I'm afraid we're dead.
Okay. A couple of years ago, there was a bit of a controversy because you didn't wear a poppy around Remembrance Remembrance Day, and I just wondered why you thought that was so controversial, given that Newsbridge is supposed to be kind of apolitical and a poppy is a political symbol.
Well, very interesting, because I don't wear any symbols on the air. I could wear an AIDS ribbon, I could wear, you know, breast cancer, all sorts of stuff. One could be a complete sort of panjandrum. My feeling about a poppy is that it has become an industrial process. But basically, every MP, suddenly you turn on the telly, and everybody's got a poppy on. And it's been it's been machined almost. You know, when I was a child, a poppy was a very, very important thing which you made a decision about buying and how much you wanted it. You know, at the BBC, in the makeup department, there is a jar during poppy time. And if you haven't got a poppy on, you can stuff one on. You know, and they don't like people being on air without one. In fact, there's a regulation that all presenters will wear poppies. Well, I don't want to be told by anybody to wear a poppy. I want to make that decision for myself. As it happens, when I go to church on Remembrance Sunday, which I did this time, I wore a poppy. It was Remembrance Sunday, and I was happy to have, in my own time, in my own space, a poppy. But they died that we might be free to choose. And it seems to me that if you start compelling people to wear things, then you're travelling down a road which ends in other sorts of emblems which you really don't want to wear.
John,
That seems to me to be the moment.
just before we wrap up,
I knew you had a question.
I did have a question. Michael Lewis asked this of Obama, and I think we should start asking it at the end of every event. If in 30 minutes one of us had to take over from you and do your job, what would you tell us? What do we need to know?
Oh, I'd tell you, relax, enjoy it, be yourself, and try to push the things you really passionately believe in, even if you never succeed. But you'll be able to do much better than I did. The great thing is not to be frightened of. If the camera loves you, and it loves very curious people, but if the camera loves you, you're already made. If it doesn't, it's a big problem. I mean, a very strange thing. It is a kind of love affair, really. But anyway, you're never aware anybody's out there. You're trying to talk to one person, and I don't know who that is, but it's in my head. It's a wonderful job. It's fantastic. I've got the best job in the world. I'm allowed to get on there every night and just say, hey, come on this journey. Let's see what the hell's going on. And are they telling the truth? Thank you.